Hello and welcome to episode 164 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. On today's show, I'll be joined by my good friend Maz for the third and final, at least for now, part of our conversation about Mary Poppins. In episode 162, we talked about the 60s movie. Last week, in episode 163, we moved on to the books and Saving Mr. Banks. Today, we're going to hear all of Maz's strong feelings about the 2018 movie, Mary Poppins Returns. Let's get right to it. Thanks for being here, Maz.
I am so happy to be back.
This is going to be, I'm not even sure, I might just introduce the topic to you and then just sit back while you finish this. We have been talking for the past 2 episodes about Mary Poppins. And now, today, in the third and final installment, we are going to cover Mary Poppins Returns. And this is a movie. Maz has some pretty strong opinions about this one. Let's talk first about, is there anything at all that you like about Mary Poppins Returns?
Yeah. There are a couple things. And I do want to say right at the beginning that we all know I'm a huge Mary Poppins fan, and I did not go into this movie looking to dislike it. I was so excited for this movie. Like I was really so excited for it. And like I remember going to see it. I remember like getting off work that day and I was like, "Oh my gosh, today's finally the day. We get to see Mary Poppins Returns. It comes back to the theaters after all this time. Oh my goodness." And it's one of the few times that I walked out of a theater angry. So I really wanted to love it. I really did. I really thought I was going to love it. I was very genuinely excited for it. And it let me down on almost every count.
Well, so that leads us to that first question. What are the counts where you were not disappointed? What were things that you liked about the movie?
Dick Van Dyke. His cameo, beautiful. Oh, well,
although
there will be spoilers.
Him being in the movie and being Dick Van Dyke and being lovable was great. I think we both have problems with some of how that turned out.
Yes.
And we'll get to that later.
Yes. But him, just blanket spoiler warning for the whole movie right now, as we get into it. But him dancing on the desk, absolutely loved that.
And Maz does not want you to see the movie anyway, so she's not worried about spoiling it for you.
That's true. I loved Angela Lansbury as the balloon woman. Thought she did a fabulous job. I think overall the cast did a very good job with what they were given.
Okay, I like that.
I think Where the Lost Things Go, very good song. I really loved the score. I thought the score was really beautiful. I loved how it incorporated little pieces from the original while still being its own thing. So you're listening to this score, underwriting the movie, and you get a little bit of Chim Chimney or a little bit of Spoonful of Sugar tied in there. And then it goes off and does its own thing.
That was the best idea they had in the entire movie, was to do that, just little teases that sort of built up the butterflies in your stomach for the first time that you saw Mary. I agree with you 100% on that. Do you have any other positives? I noticed you said the score and not the soundtrack.
Yes, very much so. I really liked Jane and Michael flying a kite at the end. I thought that was a really, really nice little emotional nod. I really enjoyed that. That's about as much as I can say for things I loved about this movie.
Okay, I'm going to say a couple more things that I did like about this movie. I liked it more than you liked it. So we're just going to address that right now. I liked that they had Jane be this worker with unions, this volunteer trying to organize the unions during the Depression. That is definitely taking from her mom and her mom's activism, but now she has taken it to the next level, where her mom was maybe a little more vanity, a little more performative activism, whereas Jane took the well-meaning nature of her mother and put it into real action. I like the scene where the woman who played Jane in the original Mary Poppins was walking down the street and they had that whole thing. That interaction, if you know it's coming, is really, really heartwarming. All right, so now people can't say that we were just doing negatives. Oh, wait. I am sure you're going to disagree with me on this one. And I'm sure this is something that you didn't like. But I love A Cover Is Not the Book. And I liked the 2 minute 58 second, whatever it is, Lin-Manuel-Miranda rap that was just outstanding. I love that story. I love that it comes from one of the Mary Poppins stories, if I'm not mistaken, or it's his version of one of the Mary Poppins stories. I think that song is the one that I would listen to after I saw the movie. That's the only one that really stuck with me that, you know, I like to do the rap along with Lin-Manuel Miranda, but I love Hamilton, so I like his style.
I do have written down. So when I rewatched this movie, which let it be known, I rewatched this movie for this episode. So that's
We
how
all
invested
owe
I
her.
am. It's the second time I've seen it. And I thought maybe I'll come away with something new. But I took some notes. And Lin-Manuel Miranda's rap during Cover Is Not the Book, I do have written down as this is the best part of the song. I thought that was fantastic. I loved that part of the song. And I loved when this is so specific, but he's walking up that little like staircase of books.
Amazing.
I thought that was great. And it was one of the best elements of the real life and animation blended together that I thought existed in the whole movie.
So now, I don't know exactly what you don't like about this movie, and I'm not even 100% sure. Well, I know some of the things you don't like about it, and I know we've had tertiary conversations about what you don't like about this movie, but I am willing to sort of step aside here and not ask questions like I normally ask and just let you sort of give your audio essay about everything you don't like about this movie.
Well, feel free to give me guardrails or stop me or ask questions at any time.
I'm here
please.
to keep you on the track here. Yes.
Yes, because otherwise people are going to be like, why is this episode 3 hours long? I think I'll go broadly here at the beginning. What really frustrates me about it is the beats are all the exact same as Mary Poppins. I'm not saying it's the same movie because obviously very different things happen, but all the beats are the same. It follows the exact same plot. Like if you were to chart the plot points and put them over each other, they would match up perfectly. You know, you start with the Bert and Jack character singing. You go into the dad who's lost his whimsy and is focused on life's responsibilities. Then you get Mary who sings to the kids and they do a little chore song or a bath song and where they learn about adventure. Then, you know, you get the calm down comfort, go to bed song. Then you go on errands to somewhere. It's just note for note, it follows the same path.
It is the Force Awakens to the original Mary Poppins, A New Hope. They tried to take the basic structure and say, everybody likes this, so we're going to do this, but we're going to do it a little different.
Yeah, and I think Force Awakens did it better. So there's that. But it's one of those things where if you're going to wait this long before writing a movie, you know, making a sequel movie, and you're going to make it a sequel, and it's not going to lead up to something bigger. Like Force Awakens at least was an establishing movie leading up to a trilogy. This was always intended to be just its own thing. And so
well, we thought that A Force Awakens was going to be
true,
leading to a trilogy. It turned out to just be its own thing, but that's a whole nother set of podcast episodes.
Yeah. But if you're going to come back to such a beloved movie so many years later and make what you insist is a sequel and not a remake, you gotta at least try to make it a little different. And I don't mean in terms of like, like obviously, Jane and Michael are adults. Like there are different things about this movie, but when you are watching it, you do feel like you're just watching Mary Poppins because the songs are all in the exact same place. They all have the exact same motivations for the characters. Not a single song in this movie motivates a character in a different way than a song in the original. They do the exact same things. And if you're going to make a movie like that, that's a follow up to something that's so iconic, especially one with such iconic music, you have to really sit down and say, are we making these songs just because this is how it worked before? Or are we actually trying to say something in this movie? And they 100% just went with the former because it was easy and they had the plots all pointed out already. And, they didn't have to really try.
So, where I will agree with you is when you hear the concept of Jane and Michael trying to survive during the Depression, Mary Poppins returns to help them. That sounds like a new premise. Like, oh, okay, I could see wanting to write Mary Poppins in the Depression. Jane and Michael struggle to be adults like Mr. Banks struggled. But I do see your point. There's a difference between we want to bring these characters to a different time. Well, if you're going to bring the characters to a different time, it should be a different story. And this is so much the same story, at least in your view. And I definitely think I do see where it hits a lot of the same notes. And when you talk about the songs being the same song for the same purpose, obviously the Sherman Brothers, with all due respect to Lin-Manuel-Miranda, who is amazing and very, very talented, especially at writing, but you're not going to beat the Sherman Brothers. And some of the songs, like, what is it, Topsy Turvy? Like, that is definitely a poor man's I Love to Laugh. Like, it's replacing it, but it's definitely not on the same level. There are some of the songs that I think kind of reach the same level, or are at least, I'm glad we got those new songs. But when it comes to like Topsy Turvy, and we'll talk about the last song, we'll get to that. They don't quite rise to the level. And if you're going to do a note for note, you need to be bringing the same energy that the Sherman Brothers brought.
Right. And like, that's no shade to Manuel-Miranda. The guy's a genius. Like, he really is one of the great songwriters of our time. It's just that the Sherman Brothers were like otherworldly. Like, their talent is not even once in a lifetime, it's once in several lifetimes. And it's just really hard to match that.
And he does with Hamilton. Like,
right.
Hamilton is Lin-Manuel-Miranda's greatest moment. Whereas for the Sherman Brothers, it's Mary Poppins. Like, that's where they brought it the most. So you're comparing somebody's second best season to Jordan, in 1992. Like, that's not an adequate comparison. Like, he's trying to do something that isn't in his wheelhouse, and he's never going to do it as well as those people.
Right. Which brings me to the question, and I can hear the jeers and boos already. Why was he hired to do it? This clearly is not his wheelhouse. And even though he is phenomenally talented, I mean, I think Moana, which he worked on, absolutely brilliant. Love that music. But this is not where he excels. And I don't know if it's because, he was given notes to try to emulate the Sherman Brothers instead of being able to do his own thing and be creative in his own way. Did that hinder him? Maybe. And maybe that's the crux of the issue, because he can write great music. But what we ended up with in this movie does make me wonder how we got there. who was like, well, this is the best we're going to do. I don't know.
I hate that you sound so frustrated and defeated. Like,
I
you're
am.
just like, you wanted to like it so much. And like I said, I did like it. So if I sound like I'm being critical, first of all, I'm just sort of building off your momentum because I do agree with a lot of the things that you're saying about the movie. That doesn't mean I didn't enjoy it. I mean, not to bring Star Wars back into it too much, but I remember when I saw Rise of Skywalker in the theaters, I left completely and thoroughly entertained. Like, I was like, that was amazing. And then when I watched it again, I was like, okay, but there really wasn't any there. And with this one, the songs, because I do like Lin-Manuel Miranda, and I think they're good enough on their own, some of them did stick with me. So this one maybe lasted a little longer where I did still enjoy it. But I definitely think your criticisms are all valid, and I understand why you would feel this way. What's inevitable that we discuss is how the major dilemma of the movie is solved, and how I don't mind remaking a movie, even making it a little worse. Like, I like some of the live action remakes, and they're taking classic movies and doing them a little worse, and I still don't mind that. But in this one, if I have any complaint, and I'm pretty sure that this is the complaint you're going to have about this one, is the entire lesson that Mr. Banks learned at the end of Mary Poppins is completely negated. And, well, why don't you talk about it a little bit? Because I can see, like, you just took a big gulp of water because you are ready to go on a rant here.
Oh my goodness. It's one of those things that I think I blocked this out of my memory after seeing it the first time, because I didn't remember this happening. And then rewatching it again in preparation for this, when this happens, I mean, my jaw was dropped, and I have a a paragraph in my notes. I'm not even kidding. Because what happens is at the end of the movie, Michael needs to save the house, the Banks family house, and he doesn't have the money for it. Okay. At the end of the movie, they end up at the bank, and they're sitting with Dick Van Dyke's character who runs the bank, and he tells Michael, well, he tells this story to Michael's children, and he says, when your dad was a boy, he had this tuppence that he wanted to use to feed the birds, and instead, after a little thought, he gave it to his dad, who invested it in the bank, and after all these years, it's grown to enough money that now you can pay off your loan and save your house. And it's just like, well, good thing you didn't feed those birds. Uh, it's absolutely flabbergasting.
The whole point of Mary Poppins is that Mr. Banks needed to return to some of that whimsy, some of that childlike behavior, not be so focused on work, not be so focused on money, that he was able to say, let's fly a kite, use the tuppence to feed the birds. But we find out in this movie that he flew the kite and must have walked right over to the stinking bank to deposit this money that was the whole point of Mary Poppins. And this is where I'm going to definitely piggyback on what you're saying and go on a tiny bit of a rant of my own. The banker finds Michael's shares in the bank that were left from his father, but he rips them out of the ledger and throws them in the fire. This movie says, in the middle of the Depression, this movie says it's a few bad apples. This one guy who is cheating the Banks family out of their house. And when Dick Van Dyke's character comes in and saves the day, and says those tuppence were donated, what ends up happening is not only is Mr. Banks' sacrifice at the end of the original Mary Poppins movie negated, but it is saying that it's not the systems, it's not the banking system, it's not capitalism, it's not the market economy of the 20s where we let everything, go unregulated for so long. The problem is that sometimes bad people work at the bank. And that's not the case. The problem in a lot of these situations is there are good, well-meaning people like Mr. Banks who just wanted to take care of his family, and the guy who was very nice to Michael's kids and didn't care that they stole the candy or whatever exactly happened there. They took a lot of the legitimate complaints about banking, about capitalism, something Walt loved, but he could admit that there were some problems with it in this movie, and that got all wiped away by this gesture. And honestly, when you're sitting in the theater, you're just so darn happy to see Dick Van Dyke that they kind of slide it past you the first time.
Yeah, and it becomes this message of, well, why didn't you invest in the bank? Like, oh, if you don't have money, I guess you should have put money in the bank. As if that's something that everyone has the ability to do, especially in the depression. Like, you're gonna sit there and be like, well, guess you should have invested all that spare change you have lying around. It's absolutely mind-blowingly out of touch with not only the world set in, but the fantasy world of Mary Poppins. It completely is at odds with every single thing about that universe. And I don't know how it got put on page. I don't know how people read it and approved it. I don't know how it got past all those layers of checks before it made it to screen. And not a single person went, yeah, we shouldn't do this. Oh,
And for all the static that Disney is getting lately for being quote unquote woke, and this movie where basically the premise is now, dang it, Maz, you have like literally got me against this movie now. And I was trying to hold on here. I was trying to at least play devil's advocate, but I'm just not as good at it, I guess. This company that everybody is saying is like completely left wing right now put out a movie where they redid a fairly progressive movie with the message, silly Michael, you became an artist instead of working in the bank. And silly Jane, you're helping union people. You're helping the workers, the guys like Bert. You're helping them. I think my problem is with the last 10, 15 minutes of this movie more than your problem being the entire breadth of this movie. But they unravel a lot in the last 15 minutes of this movie. And they take a lot of liberties that definitely impact how I view it now, a few years after it was released. And let's get to that last song. Let's talk about There's Nowhere to Go But Up, which actually should have been a really good song, would have been a great way to end a movie about the Depression. There's nowhere to go but up. But what just transpired wasn't allowing an emotional ending like that. You earned the emotion of Let's Go Fly a Kite. Every single moment of that was earned. The character arc for Mr. Banks delivered in a huge way. This, we had to think, if you're saying in the middle of the Depression, there's nowhere to go but up, you have to see the systemic changes that it took to get out of the Depression. You have to see that the entire system, that all of London, that everybody is getting the chance to get out of the depression, not just that the banks still get to live in their house.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to another note I had, which was there's no heart to this movie. You know, in the first Mary Poppins, you feel that emotion. Like you said, that is all earned emotion. You get these character arcs with these people, and it really matters. Every character in Mary Poppins Returns is static. No one learns anything. Michael Banks is from the start a doting dad who's overwhelmed. At the end of the movie, he's a doting dad who's overwhelmed. He's just able to keep the house. Okay, great. Every single character is the same. Jane has a single personality trait, and that is union worker or union advocate. That's it. That's all she gets. All of these characters are
No, she
so
gets a
static.
fella at the end. Come on.
Oh, of course, because they had to shoehorn romance in.
Which
I
we
mean,
talked about in the Mary Poppins episode, how great it was that there wasn't a romantic storyline in that movie, and how rare it was, especially dealing with the chemistry that Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke had, to not have that translate into a romantic feeling. And there's just no charisma, no chemistry between Jane and Jack, but somehow they're dating at the end of this thing.
yeah, well, he's a single guy and she's a single girl, so that's all that matters at the end of the day. Who cares about anything else? It just blows my mind that there's no depth to any character. There's no heart to the movie, and it's so incredible because so much of this movie is about our mom died and we're sad. And like to have that as a hook at like the central part of your movie and not be able to pull any emotion from that speaks to such a failure on the writer's end. Because if they're setting you up with something that is such a softball emotional pull, and you can't even deliver on the fact these three children are sad that they're missing their mom as some sort of emotional string throughout this movie where you get some sort of resolution at the end, it's just so absurd to me that they wrote this movie. I don't know. I do think most of my problems lie with the writing, and it's not the actors or anything like that. I think they did a great job.
The actress who played Jane, I can't remember her name offhand. She's in The Newsroom, that show. Absolutely love her in it. She's amazing. We love Lin-Manuel-Miranda. I think that the actor playing Michael was good. Like, I don't think
Yeah.
he was bad at his job. There are amazing performances. I mean, the greatest actress in the history of the world is in this movie, and
Mm-hmm.
she's awful in it.
It
You
it's
blew
just
Meryl Streep. How do you do that?
and the crazy thing is, the thing that really gets me about it is they did this whole like, oh, we're gonna pull more from the books with this movie. And what they did with the Meryl Streep character, they completely screwed up a book character to create her. And it makes me so mad because there is a cousin Topsy or a cousin Turvy in the books, but it's Arthur. And at the end of like the adventure they go on with him, he proposes to Topsy Turvy, but she's not the one who does any of the mending or anything like that. And she's very, very different. And instead, they gave her this weird, ambiguous accent. They made her eccentric in a way where she feels like a caricature. That's what I had in my notes. I said, Uncle Albert, you care about. Topsy Turvy feels like a caricature, not a person. And how do you do that? With, I
With
mean,
Meryl
it's
Streep, who is
right,
the most,
right.
she can act anything. She can do anything. And for some reason, this character is so poorly written that they can't get it right. I don't want to make anybody any more angry than we've already made them.
All right, hold on. We'll end on a positive thing.
Okay.
When Dick Van Dyke is dancing on the desk,
So good.
look at Lin-Manuel Miranda's face. There is this absolute joy radiating from him that you just know is coming from someone seeing someone that they look up to excel. And that is a great moment. And it has nothing to do with the movie, but it is great.
I appreciate that positive ending. Maz, thank you so much for being on this episode. The last 3 episodes, and thank you for actually like going back, watching these movies and coming so prepared. I really appreciate it.
Well, I have had so much fun. Thanks for letting me just chat Mary Poppins.
Do me a favor and make sure you're subscribed to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. We gained a lot of new subscribers heading into January, and now we've kind of leveled off a little bit. We want to continue growing this thing, and making sure that you are subscribed takes no more than 30 seconds. This has been episode 164 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. We will be back with another brand new episode next Thursday. Until then, have a great week.